Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about science fiction and fantasy books. So recently on my channel, I've decided to try out splitting up my wrap-ups into different genre-based wrap-ups. So I already did one for the romance novels that I've read lately, so I'll link that down below if you want to see the romance books that I've read recently. But today we're going to be talking about science fiction and fantasy. It's actually 3 fantasy books and 1 science fiction book, so it just kind of made sense to lump these 2 together. I actually ended up reading 12 books in August, so I'm still going to make an August wrap-up, but I've decided to make these 2 videos, the romance one and this one, to go more into depth on each of the books. And then my monthly wrap-up, I'll still talk about all of the books, but it'll be a little more brief. So I'll have timestamps down below in the description for each of these books if there's a particular review that you want to skip to. Today we're going to be talking about Brightly Burning by Alexandra Nevernight by J. Kristoff, Spinning Silver by Nevaeh, and A Curse of Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kepner. So let's just get straight into the wrap-up. So the first book that we have to talk about is Brightly Burning by Alexandra. This is our only science fiction book to talk about in this video, and this is a YA sci-fi retelling of Jane Eyre. So we're following our main character, Stella, and she's on this really poor ship that has like all of the lower class workers. And she ends up landing a job on this private ship and having a romance with the captain there. As you guys may or may not know, Alexandra is an author too, where she makes YouTube videos as well. And this was her debut novel, and I ended up giving Brightly Burning a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I ended up enjoying this book more than I was expecting to. I actually haven't read the original Jane Eyre. I don't know why I thought I had, but I haven't. And the main reasons why I wasn't in love with this book, I think has more to do with the fact that I just don't like the story. And because it's a retelling, it's not necessarily this book's fault. I don't think I would enjoy Jane Eyre, the original version, either. But with that said, I still really enjoyed the writing in here. I thought this was a really fast-paced, easy-to-read book. What's weird about it though, and my main complaint, was that it kind of felt like 2 separate stories, because we have the first half, which is this kind of slow burn romance with her and the captain, and then the second half is this like fast-paced, high-stakes sci-fi novel. And I don't know how she could have done it differently to make it feel less disjointed, but there is a very clear point in the book where it feels like a totally separate story. The pacing is different, like everything just feels different. I didn't love the romance in here, and because that's like a big element of the book, obviously didn't end up being my favorite. I just didn't really love the love interest. He was drunk like the entire time. He just wasn't one of my favorite characters. I didn't hate him, but I wasn't really rooting for their relationship. It's funny because there's a character in this book called George, and I could not stop picturing George as George from Grey's Anatomy. But yeah, overall I actually did really enjoy this book, and I would recommend it, especially if you like retellings, if you like Jane Austen, and if you like sci-fi. You'll probably really enjoy this. I think it's well done for what it is. It just ended up not being exactly my cup of tea. So the second book that we'll talk about is Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This was actually our book club pick for August. I run a book club. If you didn't know, I'll have the link down below if you want to learn more about it. And Nevernight is a new adult, borderline adult fantasy, even though our main character is 16 in here. There's a lot of really graphic and gruesome violence, gore, also pretty graphic sex scenes and stuff, so it's definitely not YA. And this book follows Mia. Her entire family has been murdered, and she goes to this school to become an assassin to seek revenge. And I ended up giving Nevernight a 5 out of 5 stars. It's the first book in a series. I haven't continued on with the rest of the series yet, but I'm definitely going to at some point. I ended up listening to this mostly on audiobook. I would highly recommend consuming this book that way, especially for the first third of the book, because the first third is hard to get through, honestly. I think it's worth it, but I know a lot of people who have DNF'd this book or who couldn't get into it, and if you only read the first third, like totally valid. So I recommend suffering through the first third, pushing through the first third, and then it gets better. The first third is really confusing, and it's her journey to the Red Church, which is the school that she ends up training to become an assassin at. And then once she gets to the school, the story really picks up and you kind of get a feel for the world building and everything makes sense. But the first third, you have no idea what's going on. We're flipping back and forth between past and present. You don't really understand the world yet. You don't really know what's going on. The narration style itself kind of throws you for a loop because it's like breaking the fourth wall and it's talking to you. The story also has all of these footnotes, which are actually pretty funny for the most part. The short ones are like nice and sarcastic and witty, and it's also good little parts of world building and history that he adds in there. But overall, all of these elements together I feel like make the book like really hard to swallow when you first pick it up. It can be a little overwhelming. overwhelming. So that's why I would recommend the audiobook. I really liked the narrator. And even though I was still really confused for the first third, I could just like keep listening to it and just like waiting until I got my feet under myself and kind of understood what was going on, you know? But then after you get past the first third of the book, it really picks up. There's a competition kind of thing happening at this school, which I think was done really well. I'm not always for the like trials or competition trope, but I think it's done well in this book. I liked all of our characters in here. We have a really fast-paced, exciting ending, a lot of good twists and everything as well. This ended up being one of my favorite books that I read last month, but I do think it requires patience, and I'm glad that I knew going into it what to expect. Like, people had told me that the first 100 pages were kind of hard to get through, so I'm warning you, not to scare you off of the book, but because I got that warning and I found that helpful. But overall, this has like a lot of dark humor in it, and I just found it really fast paced, and I was so intrigued by certain elements of the story, so it was definitely a page turner for me because I wanted to know. Our main character has this gift where she can like manipulate shadows, so she has this cat, which she calls a not cat, Mr. Kindly, who follows her around, and he's like a shadow, and she can like wrap herself in shadows and she can like travel through shadows and stuff. It's just a really interesting, well-built world. Would highly recommend this one. The next book we will talk about is Spinning Silver by Nevaeh. I actually just finished this book the other day. This was also a 5 out of 5 star read for me. This one was such a pleasant surprise for me because I had no expectations going into this, and then I was just blown away. I think this one is also technically adult fantasy. I don't think it's classified as young adult. And we're following our main character, Miriam. She's the daughter of a moneylender in this village, and her dad sucks at it. Like, he never asks for his money back. People just take advantage of him. And so one day she decides to take over for him and go around and get all of the money that people owe them. During this process, she kind of figures out that she's a really savvy businesswoman. She knows what she's doing, and so she starts to make a lot of money and turning silver into gold just from making like smart business decisions. But in doing so, she catches the attention of the king of the Starks, which are like fairies kind of thing, because they love gold, and they think that she actually has like a magical power to turn silver into gold when really she's just been like really smart. And so they come and they drop a bunch of silver at her door and demand that she turn it into gold, essentially. And the story actually follows 3 different women in here. One is a princess who's about to become a queen, one is Miriam, and then one is the girl who is indebted to their family and works in their house. This is not a fast-paced book, so do not pick it up if you think you're just gonna fly through it. It's very dense, very intricate world building. It reads more like a folk tale or like an old school fairy tale, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's so well done. The world building in here is just so impressive. And this is another one that I would just really highly recommend the audiobook for it. I found that a really enjoyable way to read this book. There's just something about having this book read to you that almost made it feel like, I don't know, like you're like telling stories around a campfire and you're hearing these like myths and stuff. Very unique book. I've never read anything like this. Highly recommend. And then the last book that I have to talk about in this video was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kepner, and I also gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This month I had so many 5 out of 5 star books, and most of them were fantasy. Now this is a YA fantasy, and it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Our main character has cerebral palsy, and that was pretty much the only thing that I knew going in, is that it had good representation and that it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I liked this because it was a pretty loose retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Like, you can very clearly see where it draws its inspiration from, but it didn't like narrow itself down and like trap itself into following the story to a T, you know? Our main character, Harper, is from DC, and their father got them in some really big trouble with debts and stuff, and their mother is dying of cancer, so her and her brother are trying to basically get a ton of money and get these thugs to leave their family alone. And one day Harper is essentially kidnapped by this magical man who takes her back to Emberfall, which is this magical fairy tale kingdom. And the prince there has basically been repeating the same season over and over again, and by the end of the season he turns into a different monster, and the curse is that he has to fall in love, but he's not himself when he's the monster anymore. Like, he can't control himself, and so he kills basically everyone around him. And as you can imagine with the story Beauty and the Beast, this is his last season. This is his last chance to get someone to fall in love with him. And while I do think this book had a bit of a slow start for me, by halfway through it I was all in and I finished it in one sitting. I couldn't put the book down. I found it very refreshing, and every time I thought it was gonna end up as a cliche, it ended up pleasantly surprising me. Like, there are things in here that are 100% predictable, and not just if you're familiar with Beauty and the Beast, just like there's just a lot of like cliche twists in here, but I still overall really enjoyed it. The writing style wasn't even my favorite. I don't think it's anything that special, but it's certainly easy to read and it's a fast read. This is definitely one of the better retellings that I've read in the last year. I get recommendations for other books by this author all the time, so I'm interested to pick up another one of her books and see how I like it, because like I said, I wasn't like in love with her writing style, but it wasn't bad and it wasn't like distracting me from the story. So yeah, I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I would definitely recommend it if you like retellings. And I really liked our main character, Harper. She had such a good attitude about herself and about life. So yeah, those are all of the sci-fi and fantasy books I'm going to be talking about in today's video. If you want to check out my romance wrap up, I'll have that link down below in the description. And I think this video is going up before my full comprehensive August wrap up. But once that one is up, check it out because I read other books outside of this genre. But yeah, if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe to my channel if you're new here. I would love to have you around. All my social media and a link to my second channel are down below if you want to follow me elsewhere. And other than that, I think I'll just see you guys in my next video very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you I feel a connection. With